I focus on my feelings without labeling it. No, I'm feeling sad. I really get connected with my body and I feel. And at some point you feel in your body, and then I'll do this thing like, what does it feel like outside my body in this room? And then I will say, what's it like if there's no barrier between my body and this room? What if I am this room? And you can extend that out in anything. And feeling is basically my avenue to get connected.
Good day, spiritual artists. This is CJ Miller, your host of the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Um, it is actually a cooler day here in Dallas. We've had a little temperature drop. It's only in the 80s, which is pretty amazing for Dallas because we were already in the hundreds. But things are cooling down, and I have a really exciting guest to talk with today. His name is Joe Kresoja. Good morning, Joe. How are you?
Great, CJ. It's great to be here.
Tried my best to pronounce that name
You did
correctly.
perfect.
So Joe, I want to share with our listeners. This is very fun for me. It was exciting. I don't know how we connected on Instagram, but I think I noticed some of your posts, and I followed you, and you noticed some of mine. And
I followed you because I was searching for spiritual artists, and your podcast came up, and I watched one episode, and then I found you on Instagram, and then I just reached out.
oh, that's great. Great. And then you're funny. I really don't. And we're going to talk about this in this interview. I really don't claim any sort of energy on my side or psychicness or anything like that, but I do get a sense of people, right? And when you reached out, and even when I went to your site, I was like, I like this guy. It's just I just feel it, you know.
Right.
Yeah, and then I see you do some talking to the camera on Instagram, and that really does help people get a sense of who you are, you know. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I just thought this guy's really direct. He's really open, and I like that. So let me tell the listeners who you are. You are an artist. It sounds like I love this. It sounds like you spent many, many years. You studied art school, but then you went into gaming and video art design. It sounds like
Yeah,
you,
I
yeah,
fell into that by accident. It was just, it was a different landscape back then, but I was trained as I worked to in computers and graphics and stayed with it for like 25, 30 years.
yeah. That's amazing because I thought when I read your bio, it says, but you didn't have a true passion for that, which is amazing. Um, you know what I realized is there was some of you in it. You know,
Yeah.
that's what I ran an ad agency for 25 years, and I don't want to do it anymore. I really don't want to do it anymore. But I realized there were certain parts of me in it, you know.
That's so true. What I found is I tend to get caught up earlier in my life of what everybody else around me was doing, and I would like convince myself that, yeah, I want to do that too.
Yeah, I think we
I
all
mean, I
do.
enjoyed it, but my true passion was always painting. So
Well, let's talk about that. So, listeners, Joe does this really interesting concept um, called color code painting. Do you want to talk about it a little bit and where you discovered this?
yes, it was during the pandemic. We were all told at work to take your computers and work from home, and we all had meetings on Zoom or whatever. It was like Google Meets or something like
Uh,
that. And we had meetings every single morning, and most of us had our cameras off, but some had their cameras on. And I would sit there and doodle. And then I started to notice that when a certain person would talk, I'd get flashes of colors and shapes. And I was like, wow, this is cool. And then another person would talk, and the whole colors and shapes would change. And these colors and shapes were never static. It wasn't like a static image, but there'd be certain themes, certain colors and certain shape themes. And I thought, wow, that's pretty neat. And it kept happening over and over. And I'm an avid meditator. So about a week later, I was in meditation, and this thought came to me: do a painting for somebody and call it a color code. And then I was just like, hey, that's a pretty cool idea. I'm going to try that. So I made up a prototype project and I sent it out to a bunch of friends and people that I know in different communities. And somebody said, yeah, I'll do it. And the whole caveat was this is a prototype. At the end, there's no obligation to buy, but if you want to at the end, that would be great. So I did it for somebody. We hopped on a Zoom. I took him through a meditation, and this was all spontaneous. I didn't plan this out. And then I asked him just some questions while I sketch and doodle. And then, that took about a 20 minutes, half hour. Then afterwards, I went off and did the painting. And this is the part that surprised me is while I was painting it, all this stuff started flooding through. It was like I had a direct communication with some part of him, and all these, I'll just call it intuitive hits. I'm like, tell him about this, and all this stuff started coming up. And I'm just like, what? What's going on? Can I trust this? Is this just my own mind making stuff up to make myself feel better or worse? I'm not sure. So I did the painting and I liked it. I was like, wow, this is a cool painting. If he doesn't want it, I'll hang
I
on
can
my
saw it.
wall.
Yeah.
So then I shipped him no, I didn't ship him the painting because I didn't know if he was going to buy it. So I sent him a digital copy and we met online again. And I recorded this one and I gave him a reading about the painting. And most of the stuff just came out spontaneously. He was blown away. He said he wants the painting, definitely wants the painting. So I was like, score. This is at that point, I was like, hey, this is something. And I started doing them ever since. But since then, more things started happening. Depending upon the person, sometimes when I paint it, I will start to see colors and shapes coming off the painting when it's done to kind of like, that tells me that it's done.
Oh,
And it's
wow.
weird because they trickle off and they just disappear and I don't know if they're going into other dimensions or whatever, but it just feels like this thing's alive. And a lot of people have told me that the color code seems to move out of the corner of their eye. They're like, hey, is that moving? And I think that's cool. So I'm just like, yeah, this is something.
Well, we're definitely, I want to talk, I'll put a little pin there because I want to talk about what you draw with, because, obviously there's artists listening to this, but let's just put a pin to go back to that.
Right.
But I think it's interesting. I want to share something with you. I used to participate in a holistic spiritual show in Dallas, and I met this guy that was the son of one of the producer, very talented, and he described himself as a psychic. And we had this really interesting conversation about the different ways that we receive information. And he said to me, and I remember this, he said, everybody is different. Some people get intuitive impulses visually. Some people get it verbally, like they hear words. And some people get it physically, like they're propelled, they're impelled to move, they're impelled to go somewhere. And I thought, that's really fascinating, how we all have a different language. And sometimes I'm sure we all have several of, might have both or something like
Right.
that. But it's interesting. I am an artist too, as well as you. I tend to hear guidance in words. I hear sentences, like boom, there's a do this, say this, write this. I don't know. And I've practiced, I'm doing a show coming up where I'm painting to emotion and music, and I'm just learning to feel and paint and just I don't try to edit it. But you sound very clear. Like you're getting very strong, clear aesthetic impulses, right?
Yes. And in the beginning, and I still struggle with this, some of the things I don't want to say. And what I've noticed is if I don't want to say it, it keeps coming to me. The thought will just keep repeating. And then I'll get all emotional and my eyes will start watering and I'll just blurt it out. Okay, got it out. Whether it's because there's always that self-doubt is like, what am I saying? Is this, what is this? But for the most part, I've been as surprised as the person receiving. So, and I get a lot out of it myself painting these. It's a spiritual experience. I mean, sometimes it goes very deep and sometimes it depends on the person, sometimes people go really deep and people just, It's just surface stuff.
You know, when I did training as a spiritual life coach, part of what they train you on is we to do companioning, which is where I would sit with you and listen to you tell your problem and then do a prayer for you. And part of that process that has really made me grow is first learning to just listen. You know, just be in that space of listening. The second is to just trust what I'm hearing, right? You know, like
Absolutely.
it
That's hard to do sometimes.
is. I'll find myself, I actually sometimes will have arguments in my head. I'm starting on my next book, and I was thinking about where I was inspired to write the book, and I was typing out a story of an experience, and I remember very clearly I was watching the moon. I was sitting out on a field, and I was really conflicted, right? And so I asked, I feel like for me it's a connection with God or spirit, and I said, God, tell me what to do. And I had just come from a really bad experience, like an hour before, a really bad experience. And I said, God, please tell me what to do. And all I heard was, didn't I just show you? Wasn't that enough? Wasn't what you just experienced enough to know what the next move is?
Right.
And here, you know, we're just like, I don't want to hear it. So let's talk about this. I'm going to share with my listeners that you did do one of these for me, and we'll talk about it later. But I want to challenge you a little bit because you kind of step back from that word psychic. Do you have a negative charge to that word, or do you just don't feel confident taking it, or what's how do you feel about that?
Uh, I don't feel confident taking it because I don't know if it is psychic. I'm more comfortable with the word intuitive because
Yeah.
psychic kind of denotes a lot of things that I am not, stereotypically. I don't have 1,000 crystals. I don't have, tree of life tattoos all over me, and I don't have the stereotypical stuff. Maybe that's what it is. I mean, I've been surrounded by psychics my whole life because my dad was a psychic, not for a living, but he gave people readings
Oh,
all the
wow.
time.
Yeah.
And we had a good family friend that always came over to our house that was a professional and still is a professional psychic.
You know, I find that very interesting because I sort of feel the same conflict myself. Um, like I said, I'll sit with someone and I will put myself in a position of ministering to them, and I hear impulses, but I do consider it intuition. For me, psychic sometimes, and I'm sure there's listeners that can argue with me on this. I'm bringing something out that might be a little testy, but there's what I call the one mind. There's this everything that's ever been thought, said, written, and done, I consider in this great one mind of intelligence. And I feel like psychics are pulling that data out. But an intuitive seems to be a little different. You know, it seems almost like I don't know how to explain it. They're like combining that information with direction, with a little more specific direction. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
No, I see your point. I guess as you were talking, it came to me like one of the things I don't like about the term psychic is there is so much kind of charlatanness associated with it. And I think that's why I'm hesitant to call myself a psychic because I'm not seeing like future predictions. Who's going to win the election? I don't know.
No.
I mean, stuff like that. The only stuff that comes through is what comes through. I have no control over it. And it's very directed towards the person and the colors I see and what needs to be told. So what that psychic seems to have like this, you're going to tell this person the future and things
You
don't.
know, it's funny, Joe, I totally align with what you're saying. I don't I still don't believe that the future is outlined.
No.
Um, I think it's a constant shifting. You know how you were describing the colors shifting? I feel like our destiny, our future is constantly shifting.
Yes, I think so too.
And so when I see something, I get so dismayed. Lately, of course, with the election, I'll get online and there's so much, oh, so much, right? And
Yeah.
people predicting. There's some psychics out there predicting the end of America, a great split in the country. California, goodbye, Joe, because California is supposed to be falling off. And I, for one thing, I don't want to send that kind of energy out into the world.
No, me
You know,
neither.
no, I only want to send love and compassion, a love for another. And so even when I do receive my impulses, I'm very careful of the wording, and I want to make sure that I say it in a way that is non-confrontational and non-judgmental, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think it's a tricky thing, right? It's you know
Very tricky.
It is. And I'm sure when you sit there, you might hear something like, "Oh, I don't want to embarrass," you have to do that too. I don't want to embarrass this person. But then the spirit is saying, "You're going to tell."
Yeah, there's been one time I didn't tell a person a certain thing just because I didn't feel like it was my place. And then a couple months later, what I was going to say, she came out with it on social media. So I was like, okay, I was correct there.
Yeah. When I was talking to my friend who does embrace the title psychic, um, he said that sometimes you'll get an instinct that someone is sick or they're about to die. And he says he's very, he edits. He has to edit what he receives, because he doesn't want to terrify people. And most people
Right.
want to hear happy, good things. Um, so it's a skill, it's definitely a skill.
Discernment.
It's a set of discernment. So before we talk about what you did with me, well, let's talk. You explained that to the listeners already, but you talk and ask questions, and we did that a couple days ago on the phone. But and you mailed me the art, and I'm very excited. And we're going to share it and talk about it. But I want to ask you, what are you using to paint this? Because from a materials standpoint, it looks almost like fluid art or flow art, poured art. But
Oh, yeah, it's not, but yes.
okay, so how do you get that? So how do you do it, and how do you get such a smooth line?
Well, the one I did for you is what I call the color code mini, and they're like roughly 5 by 5, and they're the only ones I paint with gouache paint, which is
Ah,
opaque watercolor. And I really don't, just from the little sketches I do when I talk to you, I don't take a pencil and go in there and sketch anything. I just start laying down color, and what speaks to me moves around, and then it just kind of organically, the shapes start to appear. And while I'm doing them, it will, intuitive stuff will start coming to me while I'm doing these shapes, and like what this shape is, like the broad thing. Oh, this color here means this. Talk about this and talk about that. Oh, he's got this going through there. This is what that means. Oh, that makes
so
sense. It would be that color. Okay, that makes sense. Cool.
So what I just heard, let me see if I'm correct, is when you were talking to me the other day, because I could not see what you were doing, you were actually applying washes maybe of color
No,
or
I was just sketching with the pen. I was just pure no color. I was just doing shapes.
huh. And that's in there.
Well, I do shapes on a different piece of paper. And then after that, I just take, since I'm kind of tapped into your energy at that point, and because it seems like when I can tap back into somebody and see their colors and shapes. So that's what I do. I'll look at that sketches I did, and I just tap back into you, think of our conversation, and then I just start throwing down color, looking at the shapes that I have there as a base, because I keep seeing the colors and shapes. And once again, they're never static. So I start to look for themes that are happening there, color themes and stuff. And I guess that is the part of you know, my selective artist part picks and chooses what is really speaking to me.
Do you have, and you don't have to do this if you don't want, but do you have the sketch that you did that built this?
Not in front of me. I don't know where it is.
I'd love to see what it looks like because there's a step there that I want to understand, where you go from sketching, because sketching, especially with just a black pen, isn't going to give you that color at all.
Right.
And then somewhere you're jumping into color.
Well, I find that if I do the shapes first, that the basis of everything goes off that because colors have been the easiest part for me. And it's more so the shapes that are interesting. Locking down on a shape because the shapes are constantly moving. The colors morph and stuff, but they don't change as much as the shapes do.
Oh, that's interesting. Huh. So
Yeah.
the line work moves more freely than the colors. The colors are
Yeah.
more stable.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll show this to the listeners. I don't know if you saw my preview. You wrap very well. I was trying to unwrap this quickly, and I was like, "Oh my God!" Anyway, so listeners, I'll overlay this on the screen, but I want to show you how nice this is. Oops, there's a glow light there. But Joe sends this to you in the mail, and it comes framed. It's beautiful, and it's a color coded
Yeah.
representation. So let's talk about that. Is it a representation of who I am? Is it a reputation of my spiritual sense, my spiritual state? What do you think it is?
I think it's pretty much your core essence modulating and moving because your core essence is never a static thing as anything. So that's why I'm always hesitant. Like when people get an aura reading or aura photography, that is just a static piece locked in time, and you're never like that. So I incorporate just what I see. I call it your core essence. Granted,
Or
if I painted yours again, like 6 months down the road, I haven't done this yet for somebody, it would be different. There may be strong themes of color still there, but it would be different, I would
yeah,
suppose.
that's interesting. I mean, is it capturing? So, in my book, I talk about a spiritual artist. We are capturing a moment in time. So, when I create a painting, if I'm open to what I'm feeling and experiencing, I'm creating my emotional, physical, conscious state at that moment on the canvas. It's a recording of my experience making that in that time in time. It's frozen. So I hear that's almost sort of what you're saying here too, is it's a recording of that essence, but in that moment. In
Right.
that
Because say like I do something for somebody like you, and then like a month later you have this huge awakening, epiphany, or something radically changes in your life and you're changed as a person. If I did it again, of course it would be radically different, you know?
yeah.
It
Have
only
you
makes sense.
have you ever tried to do yourself?
Yes, many times.
and
About
how
three
does
or four times,
and
yes.
how does that work?
It's it's kind of it's an assessment of where I am, and it really shows me since it's me. I go straight into, I won't say the dark side, but it will show me things that I'm doing that I need to work on.
So there's some guidance too. It's not just your
Yeah,
core essence, but there's some direction.
yeah,
Hmm. That's neat. It's very amazing.
it's
Very
fun. It brings me a lot of joy.
I think that's important. Oh, and let's talk about one more thing, and then I have all these questions, and so I don't want to lose them. Um, how does if a listener is listening to this, and I love this because you and I are talking about something we both do that's similar. We sit with someone and we get into that place of listening. How do you do it? How would you tell a listener? How if someone's listening to this and they go, well, how can I do this? How can I listen to guidance, listen to spirit, listen to intuition? How?
That's a good question. There's so many ways. One of the things I tend to do is I focus on my feelings without labeling it. No, I'm feeling sad. I really get connected with my body and I feel. And at some point you feel in your body, and then I'll do this thing like, what does it feel like outside my body in this room? And then I will say, what's it like if there's no barrier between my body and this room? What if I am this room? And you can extend that out in anything. And feeling is basically my avenue to get connected.
Mm, I love that. I
But I
do
try
that.
not to label anything like I'm feeling bad, I'm feeling great. I just try to like no labels, just feel.
I totally agree. I think that letting go of judgment or expectation, all that I let go of. I let go of that little ego that wants to control it. Like I even the ego that says I got to get this done. Oh my gosh, I have 5 minutes. I have to, that ruins it. You have to totally give up to the moment. You know.
Absolutely. I mean, it's actually how I finish color codes too, is I usually will paint it. The small ones I'll paint in an hour or two, but then I sleep on it overnight. And then when I look at it in the morning, I feel if there's a pull to change anything. And if there's no pull to change anything, I'm like, voila, it's done. And
I
it's the
met
same
this.
thing when I do other painting. It's always a feeling to me because there was one artist I was listening to once, and I thought it was brilliant. He asked a painter, are you more of an artist that is a thinker or a feeler? Like, do you have to think about the color choices? Like, oh, there's a sky up here and this is right here and the reflective light's going there. You're a thinker. Or are you somebody that like, this color just doesn't feel right there? And as far as that avenue of art, I'm a definite feeler. If it doesn't feel right, I won't intellectually sometimes know, oh, I don't like this color because it doesn't ruins the composition and this, all that technical stuff. It's just it doesn't feel right. What color would make it feel right? Or what value, whatever. So to me, it's all about feeling when it comes to art.
I love that. I've learned more and more to let go of any sense of expectation, even with the color harmonies. Years ago, and I'm sure if you were in gaming, I was in graphic design, I would pre-plan my color palette. I'd pick out the colors and lay them out and I'd think my way through it, right? And now I just stand up there and start hitting the board, right? Just
Well, that's exactly how it is in video games. You have your set palette, and
it's all in your head. In fact, I was watching a tutorial the other day and that an artist did, and it's a good tutorial, but it's going into mix this color with that, and the opposite of orange is blue, and you should always use the like stop. Right? It's like you shouldn't always use anything, just feel it. Feel
right.
it. And so people will come up to me and say, you have the uniquest way of blending colors. You'll have colors associated with each other that really you don't think about. And I'm like, well, I didn't. I didn't think about it.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Because if I thought about it, I would be like, oh, well, the opposite of blue, I need more orange in this painting. Oh, right?
Oh, and is it the right orange? What orange should I get? Let me go ask this artist what this
Let
palette is, and
Right.
then you
Let me
go
get a
down this
color
rabbit
wheel.
hole.
Let me get a color wheel and make sure it's exactly on the opposite side of the spectrum. Right.
Right.
So I love that. And I want to go back to something you said earlier because I do that with meditation is that I I project my consciousness. So first I started learning to project my consciousness into my body. You know, I don't know if you ever heard. Have you ever heard of the 61 points of light meditation?
No.
Okay, so you put your consciousness and it goes through your whole body, and you start like up at your third eye, then you go to your ear, then you go to your shoulder, then you go to your elbow, then you go to your wrist, and you're literally directing your presence, your focus to the tip of your thumb, to the tip of your finger, all the way back, and then you go back. What happens is you ground yourself in your body. You stop,
It
right?
sounds similar to body scan meditations.
Oh yeah. So well, I started doing that, and then I thought, well, what if? So that was the first step. But then I was like you. I was like, what if I push that consciousness out until I hit the walls of this room, right? Like I'm going to envelop this room. And then, of course, you go further. You can even go further. I'm going to envelop above my house, the yard, the whole house, the unit, the apartment, and then maybe the city, and then the state, right? And then you go out to globally, right? The country. What if I hold this consciousness, and I've literally done this consciousness of love, and this is what we need right now more than anything, folks, for America. Just love, 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 right? So I love that you described the same thing, you know?
Absolutely.
So it's just pushing and pushing it out and out, and realizing that you're more than just this little individualized expression. I'm more than just little, I call little Chris. I'm actually universal.
Yeah, we really get locked into our identities, and that's one thing that comes out in a lot of the color codes. Is that seems to be the main theme is identities.
Yeah, it's a trap. Um, you have to you absorb an identity in order to be a individualized expression of spirit. I mean, we're giving spirit an opportunity to create through us, but you hold, I love this. I really love these words. Hold it lightly. You hold it lightly.
Absolutely.
You know. So anyway, okay. So I just you said so much that was really interesting, and I love talking about all these things and kind of unpacking it, right?
Yeah,
You know.
absolutely. I love that too.
Yeah. So okay. So I have this painting, and do you? And I can overlay it. Once again, I'll show the listeners that this is something that you sell, but and that you do. I can have it on the screen. Did you want to talk about it? Is that do you now look at it?
Yeah, yes. Look at it while I talk about it
Okay.
because it'll
Okay.
make some sense.
Okay.
Now, for you, you do have a very fluidness about you and very light. You tend to not take a lot of things too seriously. At least that's the way it comes through to other people, how you're projecting. And that is what attracts people to you because you're taking certain concepts and making it palpable to people, kind of lightening it up and not take it so seriously, especially spiritual stuff. You have a lot of blue in your color code, and for you, that represents like big, wide open thinking, not being locked down into it. And you'll notice that you have a lot of gray separating these blues and teals.
Mm-hmm.
That light gray represents discernment and wisdom and how you discern it. Now, I want to talk about the black.
What's it, the elephant in the middle of the room?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead. Let's see what that is.
Now, the black, I consider it the void, and people are like, "Oh my God, what's black mean? Does it mean bad?" It's actually the quite opposite. It is you without any identity. You could be good, bad, right, wrong. You are all of it and none of it at the same exact time. And yours is very fluid. To me, that means you have changed quite a bit through your life and you keep changing. And that's one of the things you came here to do is to help people loosen their identities.
I love
And
that.
identity could be anything. I mean, some people get caught up in, I'm not an artist, so that's an identity. Or I couldn't do this, that's not me. What will people think? That's an identity you're holding on to. And these are all just limiting beliefs that you have. And you are kind of a catalyst to help people do that. But around your black is all this white. And white is, in this instance, it's innocence. And I don't mean innocence in the way of like naive. I mean innocence in the way of like untarnished, untainted, freshly cleaned, without all the overlay and projections of what life has given you and the experiences you've gone through. So as you approach life more and more from this innocent stance, your identity will become looser and it will move with the waters of life. And one of the things that kept coming through for me, I don't know if this will resonate, to you, but don't over plan. I don't know if you're a planner,
Oh yeah.
but it tells me don't over plan, especially around money, because that is what's holding back more flow of money in your life. It really wants to get in there. And the more you just leave room for the unimaginable things to happen in your life, even with money, it'll flow more and more in your life. And on the down in the corner, you have this deep purple. It's kind of a support system that you have in your life that is always there, whether you recognize it or not. You have some sort of support system. And this may be on the other side, but it's always there to help you. Okay, and you do have a lot of light colors. In fact, what I found interesting about your color code is when I turned it black and white, so much of it is the same value.
It is. I squinted my eyes, like an art, you're right.
And that kind of tells me that you have this view of life, whatever that is, only you would know, that you place that same view on so many things in your life. Kind of like this overlay. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm actually saying that's kind of a superpower you have. And you have up on the corner, you have this orange and this kind of fiery red.
Yeah, it's pretty.
The orange is in it, the orange kind of creeps in certain spots in here. Orange is action in your sense, but since it's a lighter, it's like taking action without holding so much seriousness in it is going to reap more benefits for you than taking things too seriously. And you may get a little fiery sometimes, especially when anybody challenges your family, what you call family, or you feel that your family's threatened. You can be a force to freaking reckon with. So that's there.
I
And
do.
you
Yeah.
you constantly have this blue shooting through. And the blue for you, you have such interesting blues. One of them is more playful, ocean-like,
Mhm.
and that's what really people are attracted to, is this playful, fluid part of your personality. And just really embrace that, because that is kind of the catalyst of making your identity stay loose and flexible. And at some point, you're gonna something. I'm hesitant to say this because I don't know what I'm saying. At some point, there's going to be a change again for you, because I can tell that you've had kind of a shift in your life, and there's going to be another shift. And it's, I'm not saying it's breaking off from what you're doing now, but it's going to be kind of something more broad and deeper than just art. It's going to hit people in a hit a wider range of people. And at first you may be hesitant to do this, but no, man, the blue sky blue is I wouldn't say forcing you to do it, but it's giving you all the information and sending you you're attracting all the thoughts and inspirations to actually go through with this. And this is going to bring you actually more success, more actions, and it's going to either you're going to create a community, a spiritual community, or you're going to attract one. Either way, it doesn't matter. It's all the same. And there's a lot of fluidness about you and staying light that is kind of what attracts people to you and is kind of your theme, and to really lean into that. And of course, you've got all this gray shooting through there, and it just shows me that you have so much wisdom coming through you, but keep your wisdom message light. I'm not saying light is not deep. Light is more it's more delicious to people. Let me put it that way.
I love that word. Ah, you must have pulled that out of my head. Uh, well, that's really interesting. It's very interesting. I want to go back to something you said because I was just thinking about this morning. You were talking about money. Um, I was emptying the dishwasher, I think last night or this morning, and I realized that, and I almost thought about doing and I'm even thinking about doing a podcast on it. I realized that we worry. Wait, let me take personal. I have worried all my life about money, and I worry where it's coming from and who's going to give it to me. And in the last year or so, I've just said, screw it. I I trust that God's going to bring me money. You know what? I have good things to say, and God is going to support me. I mean, I really hold that. I actually really have integrated that. I believe it. And so I haven't even worried about it. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm talking to you, and someone just asked me to do a speaking gig, and they said, but we can't pay for it. And I'm like, don't worry about it. I'll do it. And I think that is the bounty and the abundance that God sends us. We only have to and not in a negative way, surrender to the knowing that God has us. And when we follow our creative DNA, who we are, the uniqueness of who we are, it will be an abundant, incredible experience. And so when you said that, I was like, I have definitely released that. And I'm
That's
finding you're
beautiful.
right. You're right. And Joe, money is coming in the weirdest ways. Like someone will randomly call me and say, I saw this painting on your website, a painting, by the way, that I've had for like 5 years that hasn't sold. And they're like, here's $1,000, and it's like, oh, okay. Right. And so I think the key though is to truly integrate knowing that greater power in your life. I trust it. I trust it. And I didn't trust it. Most of my life, I was like, how am I going to eat? Oh my God, how am I going to pay the bills? Right. That. Oh. And then I'm like, you know what? And you know what? Part of that came with age, Joe. It's like I'm 60 and I'm like, you know what? At this point, I'm done working. Right. I literally said to God, I'm not going to fight so hard. You're just going to bring it.
Oh,
and
I love that. I
what's
love that.
funny? And God is bringing it. And God says, of course, here it is. Right. So when you said that, I love that. And I will say one other thing that you said that was really important. And I just got this morning. So since you did this, I have been running through my head what my next book is going to be. And I am so clear on it. I mean, it came in this morning, and I am so clear on what this book is about. I mean, all the way through. And what's really funny is it is a universal way of looking at life, all aspects of life, to ground you, to bring you love, to bring you that knowing that it's all good. And so when you said that, I was like, wow, right? Like
That's awesome.
I really and very clear, but it is like you said, it's a philosophy and a spirituality and perhaps a new, it scares the heck out of me, but perhaps a new faith. No, I don't even want to say religion because I don't like the word religion. I don't like religions. A new faith. Yeah. So that's been fun.
Yeah, I love that.
So I want to ask you this: when you do this for people, do you obviously do you do a Zoom call when you do the reading?
Yes, I
Do they
record
get it
it.
and you
I
record it
record it
for
so they
them?
can refer back to it.
That is such a gift, you know?
But here's the funny thing is one person I recorded it and then they wanted to come back and talk about some stuff like 3 months later. And I don't remember what I said. I
You'd have to go
really
read it.
don't because it just comes at the time that it comes. And
Joe, that's exactly what happens when I do prayer for people. I sit there, they tell me their problem, and I hold the consciousness of the truth. And it just, I just feel, and I say it, this, and then they go, oh my gosh, I love when you said this. And I'm like, What did I say?
What did I say?
It must have been good, right? You probably when they come back with you and ask questions, you just have to go rewatch it, I guess. You know.
Yeah, I rewatch it, and then some of them I've talked about people in their family because it was so prevalent,
Yeah.
and they want me to go deeper into it, and I'm like, well, I really sometimes I can't. I'll just repeat what I said, maybe give a little nugget here and there.
It. Yeah. I think that's great. It's a wonderful. I would encourage my listeners. I mean, wow, what a cool experience. You're truly intuiting them and you're giving them a piece of art and you're giving them the verbal side of it. So you are approaching them in many different ways, right? You're giving them a visual element, you're giving them a verbal element.
And what they've told me in the afterwards is that the fact that we had this verbal talk afterwards and the things I said, and when they hang it in their wall on their wall or wherever they're hanging it, that it has more impact for them because there's such a deep connection. It's like it's really personal.
Right. Right. You know, it's pretty cool. I was going to tell you when I decided to write my book called The Spiritual Artist, I at one point I thought that all artists were spiritual. And then I started realizing they're not. That a lot of artists, they know the technical aspect of how to make art and they've learned a way to make a specific I can make beautiful trees and they just do that over and over again. And to me, a spiritual artist is someone that's constantly evolving. You talk about those moving lines, right?
Yeah, what's funny is I didn't do any abstract art until I started doing color codes, and then I've started painting some abstract stuff. And
It's
then it's
fine.
funny, it's bleeding into my other work as well. Like I'm incorporating both kind of like abstract realism and then just abstract. And I'm more fluid now in my approach to art drastically because I used to be very rigid. I was taught in a very particular way and ways.
Right.
And but I've gained so much by doing that, so I don't want to like downplay that and demonize it. But it was all part of my growth, and I'm grateful for it all.
I have students come to my class or my retreat and I'll badmouth some of that the fact that our society really teaches you to imitate other people.
It really
And
does.
it does. It's like everything's about, well, this is how Picasso did it. This is how Matisse did it. This is how, and you're like, and then what happens is you have, a 40-year-old that can make the most beautiful imitation of any famous artist ever. But when you ask them, who are they? And so what this is doing for you is it's bringing that fluidity of growth and it can't help but inform your art, you know?
Absolutely. And how many times have you heard artists? I hear this all the time, and I see it so much on the internet. How do I find my own style? Meanwhile, they're looking at everybody else trying to find their own style. It's like, well, keep painting and it will emerge organically unless you get in the way of it, which
Right.
is what usually happens because I did it for decades.
And think about what you added. You added meditation, you added non-judgment, you added being present, not trying to get anywhere. All those things have made you be able to do this. You have to give up that need to make money. I mean, seriously, I tell people if you paint with the intent of selling the painting, you're limiting the potentialities of the piece of work. You just have to paint because it's what you do, right? You just love it.
Yeah. I remember I used to go to this figure drawing session in Seattle, and there was this real little guy that ran it. He was like in his 70s or 80s, and he had a comic strip on his wall there. And I thought it was funny because the comic strip was like there was an artist painting, and in his imagination, the TV was going on, and it was like, we'd like to interrupt the presidential debate to show you so and so's paintings. And I thought, that's a trip that so many people get into. And it doesn't even have to be art. It could be anything.
Oh, it's easy. It's very easy to step into the ego and to justify and I constantly have to challenge myself whenever I get some good feedback. I spoke at a spiritual center a couple weeks ago and it went really well. And I got good feedback. I sit there and go, I just check myself and go, thank you, Lord, for coming through, or whatever you want to call it. Thank you, Spirit, for coming through me. it it wasn't me. Right? I
Right.
hold that and keep myself humble that, that's all I
Yeah,
can
it's
do.
an interesting thing because I notice like when things either go really bad, our ego kicks in and beats us up. But equally, when things go good, it jumps in there and be like, yes, I'm the man, or I'm the, puffs up your chest. And it's like both things can throw you off balance.
And that's a little Buddhist. I think that's kind of a Buddhist kind of way of being, and I totally align with that as well. Um, I think what I'd love to. I wish you lived closer, but I'm doing this show this fall, a solo show, and I've painted each painting to a song, and I just worked on one painting, and the funny thing is, the song is kind of it's a sad song. It's a kind of a mournful song, and the painting is just it feels joyful, joyful, joyful. And I would love to have you come and like do a reading on this. And how did I get from that sad song to this? And,
Right. That's
and
interesting.
all I could think of is when we give ourselves over to an emotion fully and completely, there is a joy in it, even if it's an angry emotion. Like if we just feel our sadness, there is a joyful release because it moves on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're kind of integrating it. I see art as very integrative. You can integrate anything in your life, deep sorrow, deep joy. You kind of give it an expression to be there and not locked in your body for so much. Because so many of us lock things in our body, or we get addicted to being spirit. I'm using this word lightly, spiritual, and everything has to be positive and rainbows.
Right.
Meanwhile, we repress all this stuff we're actually feeling. And we get all this bitter and resentment building, but we're pretending it's not there. We're not really feeling it because we're better than that. And we've
Right.
constructed an
Right.
identity of like, I'm this something, I'm
Yeah.
not going to let it through. And it just wants to move through. It doesn't mean that's who you are, it's just moving through.
Exactly. It is. It's just moving through. And when we give ourselves over to that, we could create this beautiful art. That tool, that emotion is a tool that we use to build that art. And then I love this word. I think there's a guy named Father Richard Rohr. He's from the Center for Action in Contemplation. It's in Albuquerque. And he says we transmute. I love that term. We transmute it to something else, you know?
Yeah, that's a beautiful term.
Yeah. So is there anything else you want to share with the listeners? This has been a long interview, but it's been wonderful. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
Just that I love everybody. And, if you want to know more about me, go to my website.
Yeah, I'll have that. I'll put the website in the bio and people can check it out and go and set up an appointment or buy art from you. Your skill set is very wide and beautiful, it
Thank you.
really is. Yeah. But I will say that more importantly, for me is your energy is so wonderful and that's a rare gift to find in people so
Thank you. I feel the same about you.
yeah so
I
all
wish
right.
we lived closer because I'd like to hang out.
Oh, I know. I'd love you to come to one of my spiritual art retreats. I'm having one in Santa Fe next May. You should try to come.
I'll
I
see what I can do.
I'm pretty good at attracting all these interesting people from all over the country. I have a guy coming to my fall retreat here from upper state New York, and like this, if you resonate, it's really great. So all right, Joe. Well, thank you for being on the Spiritual Artist
Thank you,
Podcast.
sir.
All right, listeners, thanks for following me on the Spiritual Artist Podcast. This has been a great interview, and I would encourage you to go to the three dots in the upper right corner of your podcast player and share it. Share it with someone that you think loves this kind of information, that wants to know more about themselves, know how art informs who they are, which Joe has done here. Share it with your friends, and stay tuned for more exciting interviews on the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Thank you. Thanks again for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Whether you're watching this show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or iHeartRadio, make sure you choose the subscribe button so that you will receive updates when new segments are released. Most importantly, be still. listen, and know that you are a spiritual artist.